In a small town where dreams go to rust, Jake Mitchell's calloused hands tell the story of a man who's never had it easy. Working as a mechanic while raising his daughter alone, he's the kind of person who sees someone in trouble and can't walk away. So when he spots a woman stranded in the rain beside her luxury car, he doesn't hesitate. Without a word about his own struggles, Jake pushes her vehicle half a mile to the nearest gas station, refusing any payment with a gentle smile before disappearing into the grey afternoon. What he doesn't know is that this chance encounter will change everything, because that woman isn't just another stranded motorist. She's Elena Hartwell, the secretive owner of every dealership in the region. But will her carefully orchestrated plan to help Jake backfire when he discovers who she really is? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light filtered through the dusty windows of Mitchell's auto repair, catching the silver frame of a photograph that sat on Jake's workbench. In it, a younger version of himself stood beside his late wife Marie, both of them beaming, as they cradled their newborn daughter. That picture was 8 years old now, but Jake found himself touching it every morning, drawing strength from the memory before beginning another day of keeping his small business afloat. "Dad, you forgot to braid my hair again." Sarah's voice echoed through the garage, mixing with the familiar scents of motor oil and coffee. Jake wiped his hands on a shop rag and turned to face his daughter, her backpack slung over one shoulder and her brown hair a wild tangle around her face. "Sorry, sweetheart. Come here." He patted the worn office chair, and Sarah hopped up, pulling a purple hair tie from her wrist. His large hands, more accustomed to rebuilding engines than styling hair, moved with surprising gentleness as he separated the strands. "You know, your mum used to do this so much better." Sarah caught his eye in the cracked mirror on the wall. "But you're getting better. Besides, Tommy Peterson said I look cool with messy braids, like a warrior princess." Jake chuckled, finishing the braid with careful precision. "Tommy Peterson, huh? That's the third time you've mentioned him this week." "Dad!" Sarah's cheeks flushed pink as she jumped down from the chair. "He's just my science partner. And speaking of science, I need $20 for the field trip to the planetarium next week." Jake's hands stilled for a moment, his mind automatically calculating bills, rent for the shop, groceries, Sarah's growing feet needing new shoes again. But he smiled, reaching for his wallet. A future scientist needs to see the stars. "Just let me check the register first." The morning crowd would be thin again. It always was lately. The Anderson family's minivan needed a new transmission, but Jake knew they were struggling too. He'd worked out a payment plan with them, spreading the cost over 6 months. It wasn't good business sense, perhaps, but in a town like theirs, community meant something more than profit margins. Mrs. Chen from the corner market poked her head in, bringing the smell of fresh-baked pastries. "Jake! Sarah! I brought breakfast." She set down a paper bag, steam still rising from the contents. "Payment for fixing my delivery van's AC last week." "Mrs. Chen, you don't have to—" Jake started, but she waved him off. "Nonsense. Money isn't everything. Besides, growing girls need good food." She patted Sarah's head. "And speaking of food, my nephew just opened a restaurant in the city. Very fancy. He needs someone to look at his kitchen equipment. I gave him your number." Jake nodded gratefully. Word of mouth kept his business alive, each job leading to the next like breadcrumbs through a forest. It wasn't much, but it was honest work, and it put food on the table, most days. Sarah grabbed her pastry and kissed Jake's cheek. "Bus is coming. Don't forget. Parent-teacher conference today at 3. Wouldn't miss it." Jake watched her bounce. Out the door, her braids swinging, carrying so much of her mother's light energy that sometimes it made his heart ache. The morning passed in a blur of oil changes and minor repairs. Jake's radio played classic rock softly in the background as he worked, his mind wandering to the woman from yesterday, the one with the expensive car and kind eyes. There had been something about her, something that reminded him of Marie's quiet strength. But thoughts like that were dangerous. He had Sarah to think about, a business to run, and no time for daydreaming about mysterious women in luxury cars. Besides, his last attempt at dating 2 years ago had ended badly enough. Sarah had just started getting attached to Rebecca when she'd decided that being a ready-made mom wasn't what she wanted after all. The look in Sarah's eyes when he'd had to explain that Rebecca wouldn't be coming around anymore, that was enough to make Jake swear off relationships indefinitely. The clock struck 2:30, and Jake began cleaning up for the parent-teacher conference. His work shirt had a small oil stain on the collar, but it was the cleanest one he had. Sometimes he caught the other parents looking at him during these meetings, their eyes moving from his worn work boots to his calloused hands. But Sarah's teachers always had good things to say, straight A's, helpful with other students, mature for her age. Whatever else he might have gotten wrong in life, he must have done something right with her. As he locked up the shop, Jake's eyes drifted to the spot where he'd found the stranded motorist yesterday. The rain had washed away any trace of tire marks, but he could still picture her standing there, elegant even in distress. He shook his head, pushing the thought away. In his experience, fairy tales didn't happen to small-town mechanics with more responsibilities than dreams. Elena Hartwell stood at the window of her temporary office, watching raindrops race down the glass while her father's leather-bound ledger sat heavy on the desk behind her. The old building that housed Hartwell Motors' original dealership still smelled of cigarettes and coffee, just as it had when she was a little girl hiding under her father's desk during business meetings. Ms. Hartwell, her assistant Marcus, appeared in the doorway. "The board is waiting for your video call. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes." She turned from the window, running her fingers along the ledger's worn spine. Inside, her father's precise handwriting detailed 30 years of building an automotive empire from a single struggling dealership. Now, 3 months after his passing, she was responsible for all of it. 12 dealerships across the state, over 400 employees, and a legacy that felt like a crown of thorns. The computer screen flickered to life with faces of board members, all men who'd known her since. She was in pigtails. None of them quite believed she could fill Robert Hartwell's shoes. "Elena, darling," Richard Maxwell's condescending tone grated like sandpaper. "We're concerned about your unusual approach to evaluating the smaller locations. My father always said you can't understand a business from a spreadsheet." Elena kept her voice steady, professional. "I need to see these communities firsthand." Robert's methods were admirable, but times have changed. The Canton location is hemorrhaging money. We should cut our losses. Elena thought of the mechanic who'd helped her yesterday, how he'd pushed her car through the rain without hesitation, refusing payment with a dignity that spoke of someone who understood the true value of things. She'd spent the morning discreetly asking about him. Jake Mitchell, single father, the kind of honest mechanic who worked out payment plans for struggling families and fixed elderly customers' cars at cost. "The Canton location isn't just a line item," she said. "It's part of a community, one that's struggling, yes, but one with potential. I'm not ready to give up on it." "Your father would have made the practical choice," Richard pressed. Elena opened the ledger, finding an entry from 1985. "Actually, I have his notes right here from when the Peterson family's dealership was failing. Instead of buying them out, he partnered with them. 10 years later, it was our most profitable location." She looked up at the screen. "My father understood that sometimes the practical choice is having faith in people." After the call, Elena sat in the gathering dusk, thinking about Jake Mitchell's hands, strong enough to push a car half a mile, gentle enough to wave away her attempts to pay him. The board wanted quick profits. She wanted something her father had understood. Businesses weren't just balance sheets. They were people, communities, stories. Marcus returned with a folder. "I got the information you asked for about Mitchell's. Auto repair. Been in business 6 years. Excellent reputation, but financially shaky. His wife passed away 8 years ago. Cancer. Left him with a baby girl. Elena studied the papers, noting Jake's consistent tax payments despite clearly struggling. No loans, no debt. A man determined to make it on his own. There's more, Marcus continued. 3 other repair shops in town have closed in the past 2 years. The economy's hitting everyone hard. But Mitchell, he's still giving discounts to elderly customers, doing payment plans for families in need. What about his skills? Certified master mechanic. Specialized in European cars when he worked in the city. Took online courses in hybrid and electric. Vehicle maintenance last year. Paid for them himself. Elena smiled, remembering her father's words. Look for people who invest in themselves even when times are tough. They're the ones who understand that success isn't just about money. She made her decision. Marcus, I need you to set something up, quietly, and find me everything you can about running a modern repair shop. Equipment costs, technology requirements, training programs. You're going to help him. It wasn't a question. No. Elena traced her father's signature in the ledger. I'm going to give him the opportunity to help himself. There's a difference. She paused, thinking of Jake's proud stance even in the rain. And Marcus, make sure it all appears to come from local business groups, not connected to Hartwell in any way. May I ask why? Elena thought of all the times people had treated her differently after learning her last name, how every relationship changed once they knew about the money, the power, the expectations. Because sometimes the only way to truly help someone is to let them believe they did it themselves. As night settled over the small town, Elena found herself driving past Mitchell's auto repair. The lights were off, but a small pink bicycle leaned against the building, secured with a heavy chain. A father-daughter movie night, she'd learned. Every Wednesday, no matter what, some things were worth more than money. Her father had taught her that. Now she just had to prove it to her board, and maybe to herself. Jake stared at the envelope that had just arrived by courier, turning it over in his hands as if it might explain itself. The return address belonged to the Regional Small Business Development Association, an organization he'd never heard of. Until now. What is it, Dad? Sarah peered over his workbench, standing on tiptoe. Not sure, sweetheart. He broke the seal and pulled out a letter, his eyes widening as he read. It's an invitation to participate in a local business enhancement program, full certification for electric and hybrid vehicle repairs, plus, he swallowed hard, plus a grant for new diagnostic equipment. Sarah bounced on her heels. That's good, right? Like when I got picked for the advanced reading group, something like that. Jake read the letter again, looking for the catch. But the terms were straightforward. Participate in the training program, upgrade his shop's capabilities, and receive support to expand his services. All sponsored by a coalition of local business groups interested in revitalizing the area. The door chimed, and Jake quickly tucked the letter away as a sleek Mercedes SUV pulled into his lot. The driver, a well-dressed man in his 60s, stepped out looking worried. Having trouble? Jake asked, already reaching for his tools. Check engine light came on. My regular mechanic in the city can't see it until next week, but my daughter's getting married this weekend. The man ran a hand through his silver hair. Someone at the country club mentioned, European cars. Jake nodded, popping the hood. Did my certification at the Mercedes dealership in the city, actually. Before, he trailed off, not wanting to mention Marie, the move back home, the dream set aside for more practical concerns. As he worked, Jake noticed Sarah chatting with the customer, showing him her science project photos. By the time he'd diagnosed and fixed the issue, a relatively simple sensor problem, the man was thoroughly charmed. The customer said, writing a check, I'm on the board at the country club. Lots of members drive high-end cars and the dealership service center is always backed up. Mind if I pass your name around? 2 days later, Jake had to rearrange his schedule to fit in 3 more luxury cars. By the end of the week, he'd serviced more European vehicles than in the past 6 months combined. Your timing's perfect, he told the courier, who delivered the first set of training materials. Business is actually picking up enough to justify the expansion. He signed the acceptance forms, still somewhat dazed by how quickly things were changing. That evening, as he and Sarah ate dinner at their small kitchen table, she looked at him thoughtfully. "You're smiling more, Dad? Like you used to in the old pictures with Mom?" Jake paused, fork halfway to his mouth. She was right. The constant knot of anxiety in his stomach had loosened somewhat. For the first time in years, he was thinking about possibilities instead of just survival. "Things are looking up a bit," he admitted, "but let's not get ahead of ourselves. How's that science project coming along?" Sarah launched into an explanation of her solar system model, but Jake's mind wandered to the mysterious woman from the rain. He'd found himself thinking of her at odd moments, wondering if she'd made it home safely, if she'd had her car checked properly afterward. He'd even dreamed about her last night. Nothing dramatic, just her smile as she'd thanked him, the way her eyes had crinkled at the corners. The next morning brought another surprise. A local news website had run a small feature on traditional repair shops adapting to modern vehicles. Somehow, they'd heard about his new certification program and included Mitchell's Auto Repair as an example of small businesses evolving with the times. The article led to more calls, more customers. Jake had to start keeping a proper appointment, book instead of just winging it day by day. He even caught himself browsing job ads, thinking about hiring help for the first time since opening the shop. "You're doing something right, Jake," Mrs. Chen said, dropping off her usual Friday morning pastries. "The whole town's talking about it." "Just got lucky," he replied. But she shook her head. Luck is what happens when good people stay ready for opportunities. That evening, after closing up, Jake sat in his office with the acceptance letter, the newspaper article, and his worn photograph of Marie. "I wish you could see this," he whispered to her smiling image. "Something's changing. I don't know what. Yet, but..." He touched the frame gently. "I think maybe it's time to start hoping again." Outside his office window, unknown to Jake, Elena Hartwell sat in her parked car, watching the lights go out at the shop. She smiled as she made a note in her father's ledger. Phase 1 proceeding as planned. Subject demonstrates exceptional potential. Proceeding with Phase 2. She closed the book and started her car, but found herself lingering a moment longer, watching Jake lock up. In the glow of the street lamp, she could see him laughing at something, probably on the phone with his daughter. The sight made her heart twist in an unexpected way. "Keep it professional," she reminded herself firmly. But as she drove away, she couldn't help but smile, remembering how it felt to have someone help you without wanting anything in return. The Canton Weekly Tribune wasn't much of a paper, more like a glorified newsletter, but its arrival every Thursday at the local diner still commanded attention. This week, Dolores Wheeler's coffee grew cold as she read the business section. Twice, then passed it to her brother Frank with a meaningful look. "Well, well," Frank muttered, adjusting his reading glasses. "Mitchell's Auto Repair selected for Regional Business Excellence Program." He looked up at his sister. "Isn't that Marie's widower?" "Jake Mitchell," Dolores confirmed, stirring her. "Forgotten coffee. First the fancy car clients, now this. Something's happening there, mark my words." At the counter, Pete Davidson from Davidson & Sons Auto Shop pretended not to listen while picking at his breakfast. His shop had been losing customers to Mitchell's for weeks now, and this news explained why. Across town, the whispers spread like autumn leaves in a breeze. At the PTA meeting, mothers noted how Sarah Mitchell's clothes were newer this term. At the hardware store, men discussed the equipment deliveries they'd seen at Jake's shop. At the salon, talk turned to whether the handsome widower might finally be ready to date again. "He's different lately," observed Linda from the bank, getting her weekly trim. "Walked in yesterday to deposit checks, actual checks from the country. Club crowd, and he was whistling." When's the last time anyone heard Jake Mitchell whistle? The truth was, Jake had noticed the changes himself, though not in the ways the town measured them. It wasn't about the new tools or the increased income, welcome as those were. It was about being able to say yes when Sarah needed new shoes, about sleeping through the night without worrying about bills, about feeling like he was building something again, not just surviving. But success, even modest success, has a way of drawing attention, not all of it welcome. Mitchell, Pete Davidson's voice carried across the grocery store parking lot one evening. Hey, Mitchell, hold up a minute. Jake set his bags in his truck, turning to face his competitor. Pete's face was flushed, though whether from anger or the autumn chill wasn't clear. This program you're in, it's not right. My family's been fixing cars in this town for 3 generations. Why you, Pete? I just filled out the paperwork like anyone could have. Paperwork? Pete snorted. There's more to it than that. Nobody gets handed opportunities like this. Nobody here anyway. So who are you working with? What's the real story? Jake felt his jaw tighten. The real story is I'm trying to keep my daughter fed and my business alive. Same as you. Your daughter? Right. Pete's voice softened dangerously. Marie was a sweet woman. Wonder what she'd think about you getting cozy with rich folks, turning your back on regular people. Jake's hands curled into fists, but Sarah's voice rang out across the parking lot. Dad, they had the strawberry ice cream. She bounded up, clutching a paper bag, then noticed the tension. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, sweetheart. Jake placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Mr. Davidson was just leaving. Pete looked between them, something shifting in his expression. Without another word, he turned and walked away. That night, after Sarah was asleep, Jake sat in his kitchen with a cup of cooling coffee, thinking about Pete's words. The changes in his life did seem too good to be true sometimes. The training program, the new clients, the perfect timing of it all. Was he missing something? Should he be more suspicious? His eyes fell on Sarah's latest art project, hung proudly on the fridge, a drawing of their little family. But this version included a shadow figure she'd labeled Dad's Mystery Angel, complete with cartoonish wings and a wrench for a halo. She'd been spinning stories about guardian angels ever since things started improving, convinced that her mother was watching over them. What do you think, Marie? He whispered to the quiet kitchen. Am I missing something here? Or is it finally our turn for some good luck? A movement caught his eye, headlights sweeping past his window, a luxury car driving slowly by his house. He caught a glimpse of a familiar profile behind the wheel, but it was gone too quickly to be sure. The next morning, the Canton Weekly Tribune ran another story. Local auto shop renaissance sparks community. Debate. Jake only skimmed it, but one quote stood out. In a town this small, any change feels big. But maybe what we're seeing is just what happens when good people get the chances they deserve. The quote was attributed to Elena Hart, identified as a visiting business consultant. Jake read the name twice, feeling like he was missing something important, but the morning rush of customers soon drove the thought from his mind. Ruby's Diner hadn't changed its decor since 1982, and that was part of its charm. Red vinyl booths, chrome trim, and a coffee that could wake the dead, all served with Ruby's signature mix of warmth and wit. Every Saturday morning, Jake and Sarah claimed the corner booth by the window, their own little weekend tradition. Chocolate chip pancakes? Ruby called out before they'd even settled in. Yes, please. Sarah bounced in her seat. And Dad wants black coffee and the farmers. Special over medium eggs, Ruby finished with a wink. Some things never change, sugar. But some things did change, Jake thought, watching Sarah arrange her silverware with careful precision. She seemed older lately, more confident. Maybe it was the new clothes they could finally afford, or maybe it was just time doing its quiet work. The bell above the door chimed, and Jake glanced up out of habit. His heart stuttered. There, shaking rain from her umbrella, stood the woman from that day, the one with the broken-down car. She wore casual clothes now, jeans and a soft sweater, but carried herself with the same quiet elegance he remembered. Sarah noticed his distraction. Dad, your ears are getting red. Before Jake could respond, Ruby was already waving the newcomer toward the counter. Welcome to Ruby's. First time in Canton. Actually, The woman smiled, and Jake remembered that smile. "I've been here a few weeks. I'm Elena." "Well, Elena, counter's full, but—" Ruby made a show of looking around the diner. "Looks like there's space in that booth over there, if the Mitchells don't mind sharing." Jake found himself standing before he'd made a conscious decision to move. "Please, join us. I mean, if you'd like to. I'm Jake, and this is my daughter Sarah. I think we met briefly." "The rain," Eleanor said softly. "I never did properly thank you for that." Sarah's eyes widened. "Are you the lady Dad helped? He wouldn't stop talking about—" "Who wants pancakes?" Ruby interrupted, appearing with loaded plates and a knowing smile. "Scoot over, Sarah, honey. Let our new friend sit." Elena slid into the booth, and Jake caught a hint of something floral. Not perfume, exactly, more like garden roses after rain. Sarah immediately launched into questions. Where was Elena from? Did she like Canton? Had she tried Ruby's apple pie? Yet, it should have been overwhelming, but Elena matched Sarah's enthusiasm with genuine interest. "I work in automotive consulting," Elena explained when Sarah asked about her job, "helping businesses adapt to changes in the industry." "Like Dad's new program," Sarah beamed. "He's learning all about electric cars now." "Show her your certificate, Dad." Jake felt his cheeks warm. "Sarah, I'm sure Elena doesn't want to—" "Actually, I'd love to hear about it." Elena's eyes met his, and something passed between them, a spark of recognition, of shared understanding. "Sometimes the most interesting stories are the ones about people willing to learn new things." The conversation flowed easily after that. Elena asked Sarah about school, showing real interest in her science project. She talked about growing up in a small town herself, though she didn't name it. Jake found himself sharing stories about learning mechanics from his father, about meeting Marie in college, about choosing to return home after she got sick. "The city had better opportunities," he admitted, "but here we had family, community. Marie understood that better than I did at first." "And now?" Elena asked softly. Jake watched Sarah explaining her solar system model to Ruby, complete with enthusiastic hand gestures. "Now, I think maybe you can find opportunities anywhere, if you're ready for them." Elena's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. That's exactly what my father used to say." Something in her voice made Jake look at her more closely. There was a sadness there, carefully hidden but visible if you knew what to look for. He recognized it. The same shadow he sometimes caught in his own reflection. "You lost him recently?" he asked gently. Elena nodded, surprising herself by admitting, 3 months ago, I'm still learning how to carry his legacy." "It gets easier," Jake said, then smiled slightly. "Well, not easier exactly. Different. You find new ways to make them." "Proud." Sarah chose that moment to return her attention to their guest. "Elena, you have to come to my science fair next week. Dad's taking me to get supplies today for my project. You could come with us. Right, Dad?" Jake started to say it wasn't necessary, that Elena surely had other plans. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way Elena's professional polish had softened during breakfast, or how naturally she fit into their Saturday morning ritual. "We'd love to have you join us," he heard himself say. "If you're free—" Elena looked between them, Sarah's hopeful expression, Jake's gentle smile, and felt her carefully constructed plans shifting. "You know what? I think I am free." Outside the diner window, the morning rain began to clear, sunshine breaking through in patches of gold. The old contract sat in Jake's bottom desk drawer like a wound that never quite healed. He hadn't looked at it in years, but today, something compelled him to pull it out. The letterhead still gleamed. Mitchell & Brooks Auto Services, LLC. His signature next to Steve Brooks's, both of them so young and confident, certain they were about to conquer the world. "Partner." Jake said the word aloud, tasting its bitterness. Steve had been his best friend since high school. The best man. At his wedding, Sarah's godfather. Which made the betrayal that much deeper when Jake discovered Steve had been cooking the books. taking loans in both their names, gambling away their future on risky investments. By the time Jake uncovered the truth, the damage was done. Their reputation in the city was ruined. Marie was already sick then, and the stress of it all. Jake closed his eyes, remembering those final months when everything seemed to crumble at once. The shop phone rang, startling him from his memories. Mitchell's auto repair. "Jake?" Eleanor's voice warmed him despite himself. "I was wondering if you'd look at my car again. It's making an odd sound." He found himself smiling. "Bring it by any time." "Actually, I'm outside." She was leaning against her car when he stepped out, casual in jeans and a sweater again, looking nothing like the corporate executive she truly was. The guilt hit her fresh every time she saw him. Every morning she woke up knowing she was hiding something fundamental about herself. Jake popped the hood, and Elena watched his sure movements, the confident way he listened to the engine. In the week since their breakfast at Ruby's, they'd run into each other accidentally 3 more times. Each encounter made her deception feel heavier. "I don't hear anything unusual," Jake said finally, straightening up. "But I can do a full diagnostic if you're worried." "Actually," Eleanor hesitated, "I thought maybe you'd like to get coffee. Sarah mentioned you take a break around this time." The invitation hung in the air between them. Jake's hands stilled. On the hood latch, "Elena, He turned to face her. "You're wonderful with Sarah, and I enjoy spending time with you, but there are things about me you should know. We all have complicated pasts, Jake. Mine cost me everything once." He gestured to the shop. "I'm just starting to rebuild. Sarah's just starting to trust that things can be stable again. I can't—" He broke off, searching for words. "Can't trust that good things might last." Eleanor finished softly, her own guilt churning inside her. "My last business partner was my best friend. He looked me in the eye for years while lying to me. After that, after losing Marie, I learned that sometimes the people closest to you can hide the biggest secrets." Elena felt each word like a physical blow. Here was a good man, an honest man, who'd been hurt deeply by deception. And what was she doing? Playing at coincidences, orchestrating chance meetings, hiding her true identity while changing his life from the shadows. "Jake, She started, then stopped. What could she say? That she understood trust had to be earned, that she wanted to be honest with him. The truth stuck in her throat, trapped behind fears of her own. What if revealing everything now would only hurt him more? "I'm not saying no to coffee," Jake said finally, managing a small smile. "I'm just saying I need to be careful, for Sarah's sake." Sarah. The thought of the bright-eyed girl who'd shown Eleanor her science project models, who'd chatted excitedly about their shopping trip last weekend, made Elena's chest ache. She'd grown fond of them both. Too fond, if she was honest with herself. This was supposed to be a business decision, a way to save her father's legacy while helping a deserving family. When had it become so personal? "I understand," Elena said. And she did, perhaps better than Jake knew. "How about we start with coffee right here? I brought some from that fancy shop in the city." She reached into her car and pulled out a thermos and 2 cups. Jake's expression softened. "You planned this breakdown, didn't you?" "Maybe," she admitted, allowing herself this small truth among her larger deceptions. "Is that okay?" He took one of the cups, his fingers brushing hers. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think it is." They sat on the bench outside his shop, drinking coffee and talking about small things. Sarah's upcoming science fair, the changing autumn leaves, childhood memories of small-town life. With each shared story, each genuine laugh, Elena felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling a little more. Later, alone in her temporary office, she stared at her father's ledger and whispered, "Dad, I think I'm in trouble here. This isn't going according to plan at all." The ledger, like her father, offered no easy answers, but she could almost hear his voice. "The best things in life rarely do, sweetheart. The best things rarely do." The proposal folder sat between them on Jake's desk like a loaded gun. Elena had arrived just before closing, her professional demeanor firmly in place, despite the intimacy they'd shared over coffee just days before. The evening lights slanted through the workshop windows, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. "It's a partnership opportunity," Elena explained, her consultant persona carefully maintained. "The Regional Business Development Coalition has identified your shop as a potential hub for specialized European and electric vehicle service in the area. They're prepared to offer substantial support, equipment, training, marketing. You'd maintain full operational control, but with resources to expand." Jake's fingers traced the edge of the folder without opening it. "Why me?" "Because you've proven yourself. The certification program, your customer service record, your adaptation to changing market demands." "Elena," his voice was soft but firm, "the real reason." She met his eyes, fighting the urge to tell him everything. Instead, she gave him as much truth as she dared. "Because you're good at what you do. Because you help people, even when it costs you. Because this town needs businesses that care about more than just profit margins." He finally opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. His expression shifted from skepticism to disbelief. This is too much. The equipment alone is an investment in proven potential." Elena leaned forward. "Jake, do you know how many shops in this region are certified for both European and electric vehicles? How many have your reputation for integrity? This isn't charity, it's smart business." Sarah's voice drifted in from the workshop where she was finishing homework. "Dad, can you check my math?" "In a minute, sweetheart." Jake looked back at the proposal, then at Elena. "You're involved in this somehow, beyond just consulting." Elena felt her heart skip. "What makes you say that?" "The timing, the specific focus on European vehicles, the way you understand exactly what this shop needs." He studied her face. "Who are you really, Elena?" For a moment, she considered telling him everything. But then Sarah bounded in, waving her worksheet triumphantly. "I figured it out myself. Oh, hi, Elena. Are you coming to my science fair tomorrow?" Elena smiled, grateful for the interruption. "Wouldn't miss it." "Dad, can Elena stay for dinner?" "We're having spaghetti, and I made garlic bread all by myself." Jake's expression softened as he looked at his daughter. "If Elena's not too busy, please." Sarah deployed her most persuasive smile. "You can tell us more about the special project." "Dad's being offered. Mrs. Chen said it's going to change everything." Jake raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast in this town." "Small towns run on hope and gossip," Elena said, then added quietly, "Sometimes they're the same thing." Over Sarah's proudly prepared dinner, the conversation flowed easily between them, as it always did. Sarah dominated the discussion with excited details about her science fair project, a comprehensive study of renewable energy sources, inspired by Jake's new certification courses. "And then we can show how electric cars help the environment," Sarah explained between bites. "Elena, did you know Dad's going to be the only mechanic in town who can fix them properly?" "Is that right?" Elena smiled, watching Jake duck his head modestly. "If I accept the partnership," he corrected gently. Sarah put down her fork. "Why wouldn't you accept it? Don't you want the shop to grow?" "It's complicated, sweetheart. Because of Mr. Brooks," Sarah asked quietly. Jake's head snapped up. "How do you—" "I heard Mrs. Chen talking about it. She said he hurt you and Mom really bad with business stuff. But Elena's not like that, Dad. She's nice. She helps people." The simple faith in Sarah's voice made Elena's chest tight with guilt. Jake was silent for a long moment, looking between his daughter and Elena. "Sometimes," he said finally, "being afraid of repeating old mistakes can keep us from making new beginnings." "Is that from one of Mom's books?" Sarah asked. "Yeah," Jake smiled sadly. "She was always better at figuring these things out than me." After Sarah went to bed, Jake and Elena stood on the small back porch, watching fireflies dance in the growing darkness. The proposal folder sat on the kitchen table inside, still waiting for an answer. "Sarah's right, you know," Elena said softly. "I do want to help, but more than that, I believe in what you could build here." Jake turned to face her, and in the dim porch light, she could see the struggle in his expression. "I want to trust this, trust you, but last time I trusted someone in business—" "I know." Elena reached for his hand, a gesture that felt both natural and terrifying. "But maybe that's not the real question here. What is? What would Marie want you to do?" Jake's breath caught. After a moment, he squeezed Elena's hand gently. "She'd tell me to stop letting fear make my decisions, to think about Sarah's future more than my past." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, hands still linked, watching the fireflies. Finally, Jake spoke again. "I'll sign the papers tomorrow, after Sarah's science fair." Elena felt triumph and trepidation war in her chest. "You won't regret it. I hope not." He looked at her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Because I think I'm trusting you with more than just business here." Elena drove home that night with tears threatening to spill. She was helping him, yes, but at what cost? And when the truth finally came out, would he ever understand that her deception had begun with the purest of intentions? The architect's plans for Mitchell's auto repair lay spread across Jake's desk, blue lines promising a future he'd never dared imagine. The old building would remain, but transformed. Modern lifts, diagnostic bays specifically for electric vehicles, a proper waiting room where Sarah could do her homework instead of perching on tool cabinets. "What do you think?" Elena asked, watching his face as he traced the proposed changes with his finger. "I think—" Jake paused, searching for words. "I think Marie would love it, especially this." He pointed to the small garden area planned for the side lot. "She always said every business needed a touch of green." The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of activity. The partnership paperwork was signed the day after Sarah's science fair, where she'd won first place, beaming with pride, as both Jake and Elena cheered from the audience. Since then, equipment deliveries arrived daily. Training sessions filled Jake's evenings, and a steady stream of new customers kept his phone ringing. But it was the smaller changes that meant the most. Sarah's new desk in the corner of the waiting room, where she worked on homework while chatting with customers. The coffee machine Elena had insisted on installing, which brought neighbors in just to visit. The way people stopped calling it Mitchell's shop and started referring to it as our local European service center. "The contractor can start next week," Elena said, checking her tablet. "We'll phase the construction to keep you operational throughout." A knock at the office door interrupted her. Tommy Peterson, Sarah's science partner, stood awkwardly in the doorway. Mr. Mitchell, my dad's Tesla is making a weird noise. He usually takes it to the city, but Sarah said you're doing electric cars now." Jake smiled. "Bring it in, Tommy. We'll take a look." After the boy left, Eleanor watched Jake reorganize his toolbox with new specialized equipment. "You seem more comfortable with all this now." "It helps that it's working." He held up a ceramic insulated screwdriver. "First time I used one of these, I felt like a caveman discovering fire. Now," he shrugged, "now it feels right. Like this is what the shop was always meant to become." The bell chimed as Mrs. Chen entered with her usual basket of pastries. My, she said, looking around at the construction plans and new equipment. "Such changes, but the important things stay the same, yes?" She set a chocolate croissant aside. "Sarah's favorite. For when she returns from school," Elena watched. The easy interaction, the way Jake and Mrs. Chen discussed the neighborhood news as naturally as breathing. This was what her father had understood. Business wasn't just transactions and profit margins. It was community, connection, lives intertwined like threads in a tapestry. Later that afternoon, Sarah burst in from school, her backpack bouncing. "Dad! Elena! Tommy's dad told everyone at the country club about the shop. He said—" She stopped, noticing the blueprints. "Is that a garden?" "Your mum's garden," Jake said softly. "We're bringing it back." Sarah's eyes went wide. She turned to Elena. Did you know about Mom's garden? Elena shook her head. Tell me about it. For the next hour, Sarah shared stories about helping her mother plant flowers, about summer evenings spent watching butterflies, about how the garden had withered after Marie got sick. Jake added his own memories, and Elena found herself drawn into their shared history, feeling both honored to be included and guilty about her ongoing deception. As the sun set, casting long shadows through the workshop, Elena watched Jake and Sarah plotting where each plant would go in the new garden. They'd created a space for her in their lives, so naturally, so trustingly. Every day, it became harder to maintain her professional distance, harder to remember this was supposed to be just another business decision. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Board meeting tomorrow. They want updates on the Canton location. Reality. Crashed back. Tomorrow she'd have to explain these renovations to people who saw only numbers on spreadsheets. She'd have to justify investing in a small-town shop when larger dealerships offered better returns. She'd have to pretend she wasn't personally invested in the outcome. Elena? Sarah's voice pulled her back. We're thinking roses along this wall. Mum loved roses. What color do you think would look best? Yellow, Elena said without hesitation, remembering the roses in her father's office. Yellow roses mean friendship and new beginnings. Jake looked at her with such warmth that her heart stuttered. Yellow roses it is, then. Walking to her car that evening, Eleanor paused to look back at the shop. Through the window she could see Jake and Sarah still bent over the blueprints, planning their future, a future she was helping to build, with equal measures of hope and deception. Oh, Dad, she whispered to the gathering dusk, I think I'm in deeper than either of us planned. The magazine was 3 months old, buried in a stack of trade publications in Pete Davidson's waiting room. Its glossy cover featured the 40 under 40 rising stars in the automotive industry. And there, on page 27, was a photo that made Pete's coffee cup freeze halfway to his lips. Elena Hartwell takes reins at Automotive Empire, the headline proclaimed. The woman in the photo wore a tailored suit instead of casual sweaters, but her face was unmistakable. The same woman he'd seen having dinner with Jake Mitchell at Ruby's just last night. Pete read the article twice, his hands shaking slightly. Elena Hartwell, daughter of the late Robert Hartwell, now CEO of a 12-dealership network worth millions. The same Elena who'd been playing small-town consultant, who'd been helping transform Mitchell's shop into serious competition. The bell above his shop door chimed. We're closed, Pete called out automatically. Even for old friends, Richard Maxwell's familiar voice replied. The silver-haired board member of Hartwell Motors stood in Pete's waiting room, looking as out of place as a peacock in a chicken. And co-op, Richard, Pete stood quickly. What brings you to Canton? Concern about our mutual friend, Elena Hartwell. Richard picked up the magazine, smiling thinly. I see you've made the connection. She's been here for weeks, helping Mitchell's shop. Why would the CEO of Hartwell Motors? Exactly. Richard settled into a chair. Why would she invest time and resources in a small independent shop, unless, he paused meaningfully, unless she's planning something bigger, something that could impact all the independent shops in town? Pete felt his mouth go dry. Like, what? Eleanor's young, idealistic. She thinks she can revolutionize the industry, starting with small markets like Canton, modernize everything, push out the traditional shops. Richard sighed heavily. Her father understood the value of independent mechanics. Elena, she sees things differently. The next morning, Elena was reviewing construction schedules in Jake's office when Pete Davidson walked in. The look on his face made her stomach clench. Well, if it isn't Elena Hartwell herself, Pete said loudly enough for everyone in the shop to hear. Jake, thankfully, was out picking up parts. Elena set down her tablet carefully. Mr. Davidson, how can I help you? Pete tossed the magazine on the desk between them. You can explain why the CEO of Hartwell Motors is slumming it in Canton, playing fairy godmother to Jake Mitchell. My work here is legitimate. Save it. Pete leaned forward. Richard Maxwell filled me in on your real plans. Corporate takeover, right? Buy up all the prime locations once the small shops can't compete with Mitchell's fancy new operation? Elena felt her blood run cold at Richard's name. Of course he'd gotten involved. He'd opposed her Canton project from the start. Whatever Richard told you, here's what's going to happen. Pete cut her off. You're going to stop this renovation, cancel the partnership, pull out completely. Or what? Or I tell Jake exactly who's been manipulating his life. Show him this article. Let him see how the mighty Hartwells really operate, using people, playing with lives for corporate gain. Pete's voice softened with false sympathy. Imagine how he'll feel knowing he trusted you, knowing Sarah trusted you. Elena stood slowly. You don't understand what's really happening here. I understand plenty. You have until tomorrow to start dismantling all this. He gestured around the shop. Or Jake learns the truth about his guardian angel. After Pete left, Elena sank into Jake's chair, her father's voice echoing in her memory. The hardest part of business isn't making money, sweetheart. It's making choices you can live with. She pulled out her phone, staring at the text from Marcus. Board meeting in an hour. They're expecting full withdrawal from Canton project. Through the office window, she could see Sarah arriving from school, chattering excitedly to Mrs. Chen about the garden plants they'd picked out. Jake would be back soon, probably with that warm smile that made her forget she was supposed to be just a business consultant. Elena touched the magazine cover, tracing her father's company logo. She'd started this project to prove herself worthy of his legacy, to show she could make tough business decisions. Instead, she'd found something her father had always understood. Sometimes the best business decisions had nothing to do with business at all. The shop door opened and Jake's voice carried through the building. Elena, you won't believe what I found at the salvage yard. Perfect vintage door handles for the new waiting room. Her heart twisted. Pete was right about one thing. Jake deserved the truth. But he deserved to hear it from her, not from some magazine article or angry competitor. She stood up, squaring her shoulders. First, she had a board meeting to handle. Then, somehow, she had to find the courage to risk losing everything she didn't even know she wanted until Canton. Coming, she called back to Jake, tucking the magazine into her bag. Show me these perfect door handles. His smile when she emerged from the office felt like a physical blow. Tomorrow, that smile might turn to betrayal. But today she could still pretend they were just two people finding their way towards something real. The partnership agreement lay torn in half on Jake's desk, its clean corporate letterhead now bearing a ragged edge that matched the break in his trust. The morning had started so normally. Coffee with Sarah, checking the construction progress, planning the garden layout. Then Pete Davidson had walked in with a magazine and 3 simple words. Ask her yourself. Now Jake stood by his workbench, hands gripping the metal edge, as if it could anchor him in a world suddenly spinning off its axis. Elena, no, Ms. Hartwell, stood in the center of his shop, her carefully constructed small-town persona stripped away by the reality of who she really was. I was going to tell you, Elena said softly, her composure cracking. After the board meeting today, I had planned to what? Jake's voice was terrifyingly quiet. Explain how the CEO of Hartwell Motors enjoyed playing secret benefactor. To the local charity case? Did you and the board have a good laugh about it? It wasn't like that. Elena took a step forward, then stopped when Jake flinched. Everything I did was real. The partnership, the opportunities, the friendship. Jake finally turned to face her. The dinners with Sarah, the garden plans. Were those part of your corporate strategy too? Sarah's voice drifted down from her homework corner upstairs. Dad, is Elena here? I finished my book report. Stay upstairs, sweetheart, Jake called back, his tone carefully controlled. We're having a business discussion. The word business hit Elena like a physical blow. Jake, please, let me explain. My father believed in supporting independent shops, in building communities. Your father? Jake laughed bitterly. You want to talk about fathers? I told you about mine, about learning honest work, about building something real with your own hands. Was that just market research for you? No! The denial burst from Elena with such force that they both startled. None of it was research, or strategy, or whatever you think this was. I came to evaluate the business, yes, but then I met you. And Sarah, and you decided to play fairy godmother? Jake picked up the magazine, its glossy pages reflecting the overhead lights. Elena Hartwell, automotive industry prodigy. Did it feel good, having that kind of power over people's lives? Making us dance to your tune while hiding behind your consultant disguise? Upstairs, Sarah's footsteps moved toward the stairs. Elena glanced anxiously at the stairwell. Jake, please, not in front of Sarah. Why not? She should know that adults lie too, that sometimes people pretend to care about you because they have an agenda. I never pretended to care. Elena's composure finally shattered completely. That's what makes this so impossible. Every time I tried to keep my professional distance, you and Sarah just... She gestured helplessly. You made me part of your world. The dinners, the science fair, the stories about Marie. Do you think any of that was in my business plan? Jake's expression flickered for a moment before hardening again. It doesn't matter what was in your plan. What matters is that you looked me in the eye for weeks, knowing how I felt about trust, about business partners who hide things. I know. Elena's voice broke. I know I hurt you, but everything we're building here is real. The partnership, the modernization, the community impact. It's all exactly what my father would have wanted. Your father? Jake's voice rose slightly. This isn't about your father, Elena. It's about mine. About what he taught me about honest work and straight dealing. It's about Marie and what she believed about treating people right. It's about Sarah, who thinks you hung the moon and has been planning to show you her college applications when she's older, because you're her role model now. The last part landed like a knockout punch. Elena closed her eyes, a tear finally escaping. I never meant for any of this to happen. No? Jake picked up the torn partnership agreement. Then what did you mean to happen? Because from where I'm standing, you orchestrated every bit of it. The grant, the training program, the accidental meetings. Was anything in our relationship not calculated? Yes. Elena opened her eyes, meeting his gaze directly. The part where I fell in love with this town, with your dedication to your craft, with Sarah's bright spirit, with... She stopped, seeing the warning in his expression. Don't. Jake's voice was rough. Don't say something you can't take back. From upstairs, Sarah called down again. Dad, is everything okay? You sound upset. Jake closed his eyes briefly, visibly gathering himself. When he opened them, his expression was completely closed off. I think you should leave, Ms. Hartwell. The partnership is terminated. Please direct any further communication through proper business channels. Jake, go! He turned his back to her, shoulders rigid. Before Sarah comes down, and I have to explain to my daughter why adults sometimes break promises they never should have made. Elena walked to the door, each step feeling like lead. At the threshold, she paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not for helping, but for not being brave enough to be honest from the start. Jake didn't turn around, but his voice followed her out into the autumn afternoon. So am I. Sarah's drawing still hung on the office wall. 3 figures, rendered in bright crayon, standing in front of a shop with flowers all around. Our family, she'd written across the top, and Jake couldn't bring himself to take it down, even though looking at it felt like pressing on a bruise. Dad? Sarah stood in the doorway, small and uncertain in her school uniform. Is Eleanor sick? She hasn't been here all week. Jake set down the inventory sheet he'd been pretending to read. No, sweetheart, she's not sick. She won't be helping with the shop anymore, because she's really Miss Hartwell. Sarah's question made Jake's head snap up. She shrugged at his surprised expression. Tommy's dad was talking about it at carpool. He said she owns all the car dealerships and was pretending to be someone else. It's complicated, Sarah. Did she lie because she's bad, like Mr. Brooks? The simple question carried the weight of all Jake's fears. No, he found himself saying, surprising them both. I don't think she's bad. I think, I think sometimes grown-ups make mistakes trying to do the right thing the wrong way. Across town, Elena sat in her temporary office, surrounded by the artifacts of her deception. The business cards that read only E. Hart, consultant. The casual clothes she'd bought to blend in. The coffee shop loyalty card with 8 stamps, 2 away from a free drink she'd planned to share with Jake. "The board is pleased," Marcus said from the doorway. "They're calling the Canton experiment a success, even if it didn't play out exactly as planned. Richard Maxwell is already talking about implementing similar programs in other locations." "Richard Maxwell," Elena said quietly, "can go to hell." She picked up the local newspaper from her desk. The headline read, "Mitchell's Auto Repair Modernization Continues Despite Setback." The article was sympathetic to Jake, painting him as a hard-working local businessman who'd risen above corporate games. It mentioned that he was proceeding with the renovations independently, having secured traditional financing. "He's keeping the changes," Marcus noted. "That's something, isn't it?" Elena touched the photograph accompanying the article. Jake standing proud in front of his shop, Sarah beaming beside him. "He's keeping the changes because he's smart enough to know they're good for business. But he's doing it without any connection to Hartwell Motors, without any connection to me." The silence in her office was broken by the distant sound of construction at the dealership. Elena had thrown herself into renovation plans here too, trying to bury her guilt in blueprints and budgets. But every decision reminded her of conversations with Jake, about modernization, about community impact, about building something that would last. At Mitchell's Auto Repair, Jake watched the construction crew installing new equipment. He'd had to refinance his home to afford. Mrs. Chen appeared with her usual basket of pastries, setting it down without comment on his desk. "The garden plants arrived," she said finally. "The ones you ordered before. Everything." Jake nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Sarah asked if we could still plant them. Mrs. Chen's voice was gentle. "She said her mum would want the garden, no matter what. Marie always did say I was too stubborn for my own good." Jake managed a weak smile. "Too quick to see things in black and white. And what do you see now?" Jake looked around his shop, at the half-finished improvements, the new diagnostic equipment, the waiting room that would soon have comfortable chairs and a proper homework space for Sarah. "I see grey. Lots of grey." That evening, Elena drove past the shop one last time before her planned return to the corporate office. She slowed, seeing Jake and Sarah in the side lot, working in the early evening light. They were planting something. Flowers, she realized. The garden was going forward. Sarah looked up as Eleanor's car passed, and their eyes met briefly. The girl raised her hand in a small wave before Jake noticed and gently turned her attention back to the planting. Elena drove to the edge of town, where the now leaving Canton sign stood against the darkening sky. She'd come here to save her father's legacy, to prove herself to the board, to make smart business decisions. Instead, she'd learned what her father had known all along, that the best business decisions came from the heart, not the spreadsheet. She pulled over, taking out her phone and the business card of the reporter who'd written the newspaper article. Her fingers hovered over the keypad as she remembered Jake's words. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes trying to do the right thing the wrong way. Maybe it was time to try doing the right thing the right way. Back at the shop, Jake finished settling the last rosebush into the ground. Yellow roses, just as Elena had suggested. Sarah stepped back to survey their work. "Dad," she said softly, "the flowers make everything look more like home." "Yeah," Jake replied, brushing dirt from his hands. "Yeah, they do." Above them, the first. Stars began to appear in the twilight sky, each one a small light against the gathering darkness, each one a reminder that even the longest nights eventually gave way to dawn. The letter from Elena's father had been in his desk drawer for months, meant to be opened when she took full control of the company. She'd been avoiding it, but tonight, sitting in her father's old office with the weight of her mistakes heavy on her shoulders, she finally broke the seal. "My dearest Elena," Her father's familiar handwriting began. If you're reading this, you've probably already discovered that running a business isn't about spreadsheets and profit margins. It's about people, about trust, about making mistakes, and having the courage to fix them. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she continued reading. I made plenty of mistakes building this company. Asked Richard Maxwell about the time I nearly bankrupted us trying to save a failing dealership in '85. But you know what I learned? Sometimes the biggest mistakes lead to the best opportunities. If you're brave enough to admit you were wrong and humble enough to try again. Across town, Jake sat in his quiet kitchen, looking at his own piece of the past. Marie's journal, opened to an entry from just months before she died. Jake's always been too hard on himself, she'd written. He sees the world in sharp lines. Right and wrong, truth and lies. But life isn't like the engines he fixes. Sometimes good people make bad choices for the right reasons. Sometimes trust isn't about never being wrong, but about being brave enough to try again. He closed the journal, remembering Elena's face when she tried to explain. He'd been too angry to really listen then, too hurt to see past the betrayal, to the person beneath it. Sarah's voice drifted down from upstairs where she was talking on the phone with her grandmother. Yeah, the garden's really pretty now. Elena helped pick out the roses before everything got complicated. Complicated. Such a simple word for such a tangled mess of feelings. In her office, Elena reached the end of her father's letter. The hardest lesson I ever learned was that being right isn't the same as doing right. Don't let pride stop you from fixing your mistakes, sweetheart, and don't let fear keep you from fighting for what matters. She set the letter down and pulled up the draft press release she'd been working on all week. The headline read, Hartwell Motors CEO reveals truth behind Canton initiative. Meanwhile, Jake walked out to the garden, now thriving in the cool evening air. Yellow roses climbed the trellis, Elena's roses, as Sarah insisted on calling them. Their scent reminded him of that day in the diner when Elena had first joined them for breakfast. How natural it had felt. How right Mrs. Chen's words from that morning echoed in his mind. You know, Jake, when my husband lied about losing his job, I was so angry I couldn't see straight. But then I realized he lied because he was ashamed, because he wanted to protect me. Sometimes the lie isn't the real story, it's the reason behind it. He touched one of the roses gently. What had been Eleanor's reason? Not profit. She could have bought his shop 10 times over if that's what she'd wanted. Not corporate games. She'd invested too much time, too much of herself in their community. The sound of Sarah's laughter floated down from her bedroom window, reminding him of all the times Elena had sat with her, helping with homework, listening to her dreams, treating her not like a business obligation, but like family. In the corporate office, Eleanor stared at her computer screen, at the words that would reveal everything to the world. Her father's letter sat beside her keyboard, its corners worn from her repeated handling. Marcus, she called out. When her assistant appeared, she handed him the press release. Send this to all major outlets and schedule a town hall meeting in Canton for tomorrow evening. Are you sure about this? Eleanor thought of Jake's face. When he talked about trust, about Sarah's bright dreams, about a community that had welcomed her before they knew her name. Yes, she said quietly. It's time to do the right thing. The right way. Back in his garden, Jake pulled out his phone, looking at the last text Elena had sent weeks ago. Some things are worth more than pride. He hadn't understood then. Maybe he was starting to now. Sarah appeared at his side, homework finished, her mother's gentle wisdom in her eyes. Dad? Tommy's dad says Elena's going to make some big announcement tomorrow. About us. About everything. Jake looked at his daughter, seeing Marie's forgiveness in her face, hearing his own father's voice about second chances, feeling the weight of all the lessons life had tried to teach him about the space between right and wrong. Then I guess, he said slowly, we should be there to hear it. Above them, the roses nodded in the evening breeze. their yellow petals glowing in the last light of day, a color that spoke of friendship, of new beginnings, of the courage it takes to try again. The Canton Community Center hadn't been this full since last year's Christmas pageant. Jake stood at the back, Sarah's hand tight in his, watching Elena approach the podium. She wore a simple blue dress instead of her corporate suits, her father's worn ledger clutched in her hands like a shield. "Most of you know me as Elena Hart, the consultant," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her fingers. "Some of you recently learned I'm Elena Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Motors. Both of those things are true, but neither is the whole. Truth." Jake felt Sarah squeeze his hand as Elena opened the ledger. "My father wrote something in here 30 years ago, when this town was struggling through its first big recession. He wrote, 'Canton isn't just a market to exploit, it's a community worth investing in.' I came here thinking I could prove myself by following his business model. Instead, I learned what he really meant." She looked up, her eyes finding Jake's, across the crowded room. "I learned it from a mechanic who works out payment plans for struggling families, from a single father who puts his daughter's homework space ahead of his own office, from a community that still believes in helping neighbors before helping bottom lines." Sarah tugged at Jake's sleeve. "Dad, she's talking about us." "Yeah, sweetheart," Jake whispered. "She is," Elena continued, her voice growing stronger. "I concealed my identity because I wanted to understand this town honestly, without the Hartwell name influencing things. That part was wrong, and I'm sorry. But everything else, the partnership program, the modernization initiative, the community investment, that was all real." She pulled out a stack of papers from behind the podium. "Which is why I'm announcing today that Hartwell Motors is establishing a permanent community partnership division, starting here in Canton. We're creating a fund for independent shop modernization, technical training programs, and youth education initiatives, and we're doing it not as corporate owners, but as community partners." A murmur ran through the crowd. In the third row, Pete Davidson shifted uncomfortably as Richard Maxwell quietly got up and left the room. "The truth is," Eleanor's voice softened, becoming more personal, "I fell in love with this town, with its people, with its potential, with—" She paused, looking directly at Jake again. "With everything it taught me about what really matters in business and in life." She stepped away from the podium, opening her father's ledger one last time. "My father wrote something else in here just before he died. He wrote, 'The best legacy isn't the one you leave behind. It's the one you build with others.' I didn't understand that when I came to Canton. I do now." After the presentation, as people clustered in small groups discussing the announcement, Jake found himself walking toward the garden behind the community center. He wasn't surprised to find Eleanor there, sitting on a bench among the late blooming flowers. "Yellow roses here too," he observed quietly. Elena looked up, hope and uncertainty warring in her expression. "The garden committee planted them last spring. Dad always said every public space should have them. They mean new beginnings," Jake finished. "Sarah told me, several times actually. She's gotten very interested in flower meanings lately." A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with all the things they hadn't said. Finally, Jake pulled a folded paper from his pocket, his new business plan, written in his own hand. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about what you said about community partnerships, about doing things the right way." He held out the paper. "I could use someone to look this over, someone who understands both business and people." Elena took the paper with trembling fingers. "Jake, I'm not saying I'm ready to forget everything," he interrupted gently. "But Marie used to tell me that forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past. It's about being willing to build a different future." "A different future," Elena repeated softly, looking down at his business plan. "I'd like that." From the community center doorway, Sarah watched them, a small smile playing on her lips. She pulled out her phone and typed a quick text to Mrs. Chen. Operation Garden Talk worked. They're actually talking. Back in the garden, Jake gestured to the bench, and Elena moved over to make room. Together they began to review his plans, their shoulders barely touching as they leaned over the paper. Above them, the afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold, and somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed the hour. You know, Jake said after a while, Sarah's science fair project this year is about community environmental initiatives. She was wondering if you'd help her with the research. Elena's heart skipped. I'd love to. She misses you, he added quietly. We both do. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the man who'd pushed her car through the rain without expecting anything in return. I miss you too, both of you, more than I should probably admit in a professional capacity. Jake's lips quirked, in the ghost of a smile. Maybe we should stop worrying about professional capacity and just be us, whoever that turns out to be. Whoever that turns out to be, Elena repeated, hope blooming in her chest like yellow roses in spring. I'd like that very much. The joint venture agreement sat unsigned on Jake's desk, but this time it wasn't about distrust. He and Elena had spent the past week revising it together, evenings spent poring over details while Sarah did homework nearby, occasionally offering her own surprisingly insightful suggestions. What about a training program for high school students? She'd asked last night, looking up from her science project. Like how Dad teaches me about cars, but for kids who don't have mechanic parents. Now, Elena sat across from Jake, adding that very provision to the document. She'd switched to reading glasses for the fine print, a small detail that made her seem more real somehow, less the corporate CEO and more the woman who'd helped plant his garden. The board approved the education initiative, she said, making a final notation. They actually seemed impressed by the community engagement angle. Imagine that, Jake smiled. Big business discovering that small towns have value. They're discovering what your shop proved. That investment in people yields better returns than just focusing on profit. She paused, then added softly, something my father tried to teach me for years. Jake watched her touch her father's ledger, which had taken up permanent residence on the corner of his desk. You know, Marie would have liked him. She always said the measure of a business wasn't its bottom line, but how it lifted up its community. I wish I could have met her. Elena's voice was gentle. Sarah talks about her all the time now. I think she's decided it's okay to share those memories again. Through the office window, they could see Sarah showing Tommy Peterson the electric car charging station being installed in the shop's parking lot. Her enthusiasm for environmental science had only grown since Elena's return, sparked by their discussions about the future of automotive technology. Speaking of Sarah, Jake said, she's been asking if you'll come to her presentation next week, the one about sustainable business practices in small communities, the one she's been researching for months. I wouldn't miss it. Elena hesitated. But are you sure about me being there? I mean, people will talk. People already talk. Jake reached across the desk, covering her hand with his. Let them. This time we'll give them the truth to talk about. The truth had become their foundation over the past weeks. Elena had moved her temporary office to the dealership, but spent most afternoons at Jake's shop, being openly involved in both businesses. She attended town council meetings as herself, Elena Hartwell, and made no secret of her investment in Canton's future. Mrs. Chen had been the first to embrace the change, arriving one morning with 2 types of pastries. The fancy ones, she'd announced, are for Ms. Hartwell, CEO. The regular ones are for our Elena, who helps Sarah with science and knows how to appreciate simple things. The bell above the shop door chimed, and Marcus entered, carrying blueprints. The contractors need final approval on the training center layout. What had started as a simple shop renovation had evolved into something bigger, a modern facility that would serve both as Jake's business and as a training hub for the community. The plans now included classrooms, workshop spaces, and a student garage where local kids could learn basic automotive skills. "What do you think?" Elena asked Jake, spreading out the blueprints. "It's your shop, your vision." Jake studied the plans, remembering his own father teaching him about engines, about honest work, about building something that would last. "Our vision," he corrected quietly. "If we're doing this, we're doing it together. No more separate worlds." Elena's eyes softened. "Together," she agreed, then added with a small smile, "but you're still the boss of the repair shop. I know better than to tell a master mechanic how to run his business." Smart woman. Jake's hand found hers again. "That's probably why Sarah's already planning to intern at Hartwell Motors when she's in college. Something about wanting to understand both sides of the industry." "Both sides," Elena mused. "You know, that's what Dad always wanted. Corporate and independent shops working together, supporting each other. He would have loved seeing this." "Marie too," Jake said. "She always said life's biggest blessings often come disguised as complications." Outside, Sarah's laugh carried through the open window as she explained hybrid technology to Tommy. The sound mixed with the rhythm of construction, the murmur of customers in the waiting room, the familiar symphony of a business that had become so much more than just a shop. Elena squeezed Jake's hand. "Ready to sign?" He picked up the pen, but paused before signing. "You know this means you're stuck with us, right? No more running back to corporate headquarters when things get complicated." "Complicated is what brought me here in the first place," Elena replied, "and complicated is what made me stay." Together, they signed their names, not just to a business agreement, but to a future they would build together, one yellow rose at a time. The family dinner invitation had been Sarah's idea, though both Jake and Elena suspected Mrs. Chen's influence in the timing. The autumn evening had drawn most of Canton's prominent citizens to Jake's backyard, where tables groaned under the weight of potluck dishes and string lights twinkled overhead like stars. "You've got to try Mrs. Chen's dumplings," Elena told Marcus, who'd shed his usual corporate attire for casual wear. "They're better than anything you'll find in the city." "Everything's better than the city these days," Marcus replied, watching Sarah proudly give tours of the garden to guests. "I haven't seen you this happy in years, boss." Elena's eyes found Jake across the yard, where he was explaining the shop's new apprenticeship program to the high school principal. He caught her gaze and smiled, the kind of smile that still made her heart skip even after these past months of building their life together. "The board meeting went well yesterday," she said, though Marcus already knew. "They've approved expansion of the community partnership program to 3 more towns." "Because it works," Mrs. Chen interrupted, appearing with more dumplings. "Look around. This is what business should be. People talking, sharing, growing together. The evidence was everywhere." Pete Davidson, who'd finally accepted Elena's olive branch, was discussing hybrid technology with one of Hartwell Motors' master technicians. The mayor and the local bank president were examining Sarah's science fair trophy while she explained how electric vehicles could revitalize small-town economies. Tommy Peterson's father, once Elena's critic, now approached her with genuine warmth. "Elena, I wanted you to know. The dealership's new service center partnership with Jake's training program. It's brilliant. My company's considering something similar for our Chicago locations." "It was Jake's idea," Elena said proudly. "He understood that independent shops and dealerships could be partners instead of competitors." "Speaking of partners," Mrs. Chen nudged Elena gently, "I believe your mechanic is looking rather lost without you." Indeed, Jake was making his way toward her through the crowd. He'd changed after work into the blue shirt she loved, the one that matched his eyes and made him look more businessman than mechanic. Not that Eleanor minded either version. She'd fallen in love with both the skilled craftsman and the savvy entrepreneur he was becoming. "Sarah wants to make an announcement," he said quietly, taking Elena's hand. "She's been practicing it all week." They gathered around the garden, where Sarah stood nervously between the yellow roses that had started everything. She held a carefully rolled piece of paper tied with ribbon. Hi everyone," she began, her voice steadying as she found her father and Elena in the crowd. "So, in science class, we're learning about ecosystems, about how different species support each other, and it made me think about communities, about how people do the same thing." She unrolled her paper, a carefully drawn diagram of Canton, with the shop and the dealership highlighted, connected by lines to schools, businesses and community centers. "What Dad and Elena are doing, it's like creating an ecosystem, where everyone helps everyone else grow." She paused, gathering courage. "And I was thinking, maybe it's time our family ecosystem grew too. Elena's already part of everything else we do." Jake's hand tightened on Elena's as they realized where Sarah was going with this. Mrs. Chen dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. "So," Sarah continued, her voice clear and sure now, "I was wondering if maybe Elena would like to make it official, because Dad's happier when she's here, and I always wanted a mum who could explain electric cars and—" She pulled something from her pocket, a small wrapped package. "This is from both of us." Eleanor stepped forward on trembling legs to accept the gift. Inside was a key on a rose-shaped keychain. "To our home," Jake said softly, joining them. "If you want it. If you're ready to make Canton your permanent address." Elena looked at the key, at Sarah's hopeful face, at Jake's loving eyes. She thought of her corporate apartment in the city, cold and empty, compared to the warmth of this moment. "I think," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "Canton has been my real home, since the day a kind mechanic pushed my car through the rain." Sarah launched herself into Elena's arms as applause erupted around them. Mrs. Chen was openly crying now, and even Marcus looked suspiciously misty-eyed. Later, after the guests had gone and Sarah had fallen asleep on the porch swing, Jake and Elena stood in their garden now, truly and completely. "You know," Jake said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, "when Marie died, I thought I'd never have a real family again. Never find someone who could love Sarah like their own, and I thought I had to choose," Elena replied, leaning back against him, "between my father's legacy and my own happiness. Turns out sometimes the best business decisions are the ones your heart makes for you." Above them, the string lights twinkled, like the stars that had witnessed their first meeting. From the kitchen window came the warm glow of home, and all around them bloomed the yellow roses that had marked their journey from strangers to family. "Welcome home," Jake whispered, and Elena turned in his arms to kiss him, knowing that sometimes the biggest dreams come true in the smallest towns, and the best kind of love grows, not in spite of complications, but because of them. The rain fell soft and steady, just as it had that first day. Elena stood at the exact spot where her car had broken down, though now she was deliberately early for the ceremony. Jake's truck pulled up beside her, and she smiled at the symmetry of it all. "You know," he said, stepping out into the drizzle, "normal people don't choose to have groundbreaking ceremonies in the rain." "Since when have we done anything the normal way?" Elena reached for his hand as Sarah bounded out of the truck, protected by her bright yellow raincoat. "Mom, Dad, look." Sarah pointed to where the old Mitchell's Auto Repair sign was being carefully removed. The new one waited under a tarp. Mitchell Technical Training Center, a Hartwell community partnership. 1 year had passed since their first encounter on this road. In that time, they'd built more than just a business partnership. Their wedding, 2 months ago, had been simple and perfect. In the garden, of course, surrounded by yellow roses and their closest friends. Sarah had been their flower girl and ring bearer, proudly introducing Elena as "my mom" to everyone who would listen. "Ready?" Jake squeezed her hand as workers began gathering for the ceremony. Elena touched the locket at her throat. Inside, a tiny photo of her father faced one of Marie, watching over this new family they'd somehow built from loss and hope and second chances. Almost. She nodded toward the approaching crowd. Look who made it. Pete Davidson led a group of local mechanics, each carrying tools that would be used in the ceremonial first work on the training center. Behind them came Mrs. Chen with her catering team, followed by Marcus escorting Elena's board members, the same ones who'd once doubted her vision for Canton. My father would love this, Elena murmured. A corporate CEO and an independent mechanic, building something bigger than both worlds. Marie too, Jake added softly. She always said the best businesses grow from love, not just ambition. Sarah, who'd been greeting arriving guests, rushed back to them. Tommy says his dad's garage is joining the partnership program too. And guess what? He's letting Tommy be one of the first student apprentices here. The crowd grew larger as more townspeople arrived, drawn by the significance of the moment. This wasn't just another business expansion. It was proof that their small town could embrace change without losing its heart. Mayor Wilson approached the microphone they'd set up. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here today to celebrate not just a new building, but a new vision for Canton. A year ago, a chance encounter in the rain led to something none of us could have predicted. As the mayor spoke, Elena thought about that day, how close she'd come to calling her driver instead of accepting help from a kind stranger. How easily this might never have happened. I haven't told you something, she whispered to Jake as the speech continued. That day, when my car broke down, I had a corporate car service on speed dial. I could have called them any time. Jake turned to her, realization dawning. But you didn't. No. She smiled, remembering. There was this, this integrity about you. The way you helped without expecting anything in return. It reminded me of how Dad said business should be done, with heart, with honor. And here I thought it was my rugged mechanic charm, he teased. That too, she laughed softly. Though I didn't expect the charming mechanic to come with such an amazing daughter. Sarah, overhearing, beamed at them both before turning back to the ceremony. The mayor was wrapping up his speech, calling them forward for the official groundbreaking. They stepped up together, CEO, mechanic, and their precious bridge between worlds, to turn the first soil for the training center. As they did, the rain began to ease, and a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds. Look, Sarah pointed up, a rainbow. Indeed, an arc of colors stretched across the sky, one end seeming to touch the very spot where they'd first met. The crowd murmured appreciatively at the timing. Not just a rainbow, Mrs. Chen called out, a sign. My grandmother always said that rain on new beginnings means heaven is blessing the future. Elena felt Jake's arm slip around her waist as they watched their friends and neighbors begin the celebration. This spot would always be special, where a broken-down car led to a mended heart, where corporate ambition learned to dance with small-town values, where a family found its missing piece. You know what this means? Sarah asked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. What's that, sweetheart? Jake and Elena asked together. It means even the weather knows some things are just meant to be. Above them, the rainbow brightened as the sun broke fully through the clouds, painting Canton in colors of promise, of destiny, of love that blooms like yellow roses after rain. The wedding invitation sat framed in Jake's office, its elegant design featuring a wrench and rose intertwined. Love blooms in unexpected places, the text read, followed by their names and the date that had changed everything. But it wasn't the invitation that caught visitors' attention. It was the photograph beside it, taken at their first graduation ceremony at the Mitchell Technical Training Center. 1 year after the groundbreaking, the center had already certified 30 students, including Tommy Peterson, who now managed his father's newly modernized shop. Sarah, starting her first year of high school, spent afternoons helping younger students understand the basics of electric vehicle technology. Her confidence growing with every lesson, just like her mother, Mrs. Chen often said, though no one was quite sure anymore whether she meant Marie or Elena. Somehow, in the gentle way of small towns and big hearts, there was room for both. The mother who had given Sarah life, and the one who had helped her find her path. The Hartwell-Mitchell Community Partnership Program had expanded to 12 towns now, each one following Canton's model of cooperation between corporate resources and local expertise. Elena split her time between the corporate office and home, though home always won when there was a choice to make. The board had finally understood what her father had known all along, that the best business decisions often looked like heart decisions in disguise. Jake's original shop remained, now a certified European and electric vehicle service center, but he spent most of his time teaching at the training center. "There's something about passing on knowledge," he told Elena one evening as they watched Sarah tutoring a young student. "It feels like leaving more than just a business behind." Their garden had grown too, yellow roses now joined by all sorts of flowers, each chosen by Sarah to represent different parts of their story. Red roses for love, daisies for new beginnings, forget-me-nots for Marie's memory. Elena's father's ledger sat in a place of honor in their home office, its pages now supplemented by Jake's careful notes about building legacies that mattered. On quiet evenings, they still sat in the garden, marveling at how a broken-down car and a rainy day had led to this life they'd built together. Sarah would often join them, bringing homework or dreams or both, secure in the love of two parents who had learned that the best families, like the best businesses, grew stronger through challenges. "You know what I think?" Sarah said one such evening, looking up from her advanced placement physics homework. "I think Mom sent Elena to us that day. The car breaking down, the rain, everything. It wasn't just chance." Jake and Elena exchanged glances, remembering Elena's confession about having a car service she didn't call. "Sometimes the best miracles were the ones you chose to let happen." "Maybe," Jake agreed, pulling Elena closer as the sunset painted Canton's sky in shades of promise. "Or maybe some people are just meant to find each other, even if they have to break down on the side of the road to do it." Elena smiled, thinking of all the twists and turns that had led them here. "Your mum was right. About one thing for sure, Sarah," she said softly. "Sometimes life's biggest blessings really do come, disguised as complications." Above them, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, twinkling like the string lights from their garden dinner so long ago. In the distance, Canton's lights began to glow, each one a reminder of dreams that had bloomed like roses after rain.